Can't see you at all. Oh, all right. So how about another panel this week? So as a quick reminder, every morning this week, we in the sanctuary have prayer at 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. So come and join us. Or if you can't come, then just set an alarm and wake up and pray with us. Put on some worship music, scroll some scriptures. We're probably going to try to go live either Wednesday or Saturday or Friday. We'll let you know. We'll go live for that morning, and it'll literally just be some music with some scriptures, and then somebody will close out in prayer. So wake up and pray with us. We're praying intentionally on the last week of this fast because I don't like diets, but I don't mind fasting and prayer. I actually believe God and expect God to speak when I'm fasting and praying and seeking Him. That's a lot of what we were talking about yesterday. If you haven't seen yesterday's service, you go back and watch. I know we were having some vocal issues, but our online only, we recorded just for people to be able to watch from there. So Jesus in the small things, and then there were some celebratory moments. I want to start with what you were celebrating in staff, just as a whole. Like, tell even your story growing up, this idea that you had of the pastor. Because I feel like we've got to break down that wall and like not let ministry be so intimidating.
Yes, I really was just sharing about how growing up, I always saw the pastor as like not more than human, but not human. You know, like they were perfect. They never said the wrong thing. What they said was like, you can take that to the bank, trust it with everything you've got. Don't even have to check it against scripture. Like that's just, and I wasn't ever told that. It was just kind of like this, I don't know, the culture, the atmosphere where I just like, I felt that. Like, and I saw pastors that way. And I'm not saying it's anybody's specific's fault. That's how I always saw it. And so I thought it was good yesterday for us to be able to take the time and say, hey, like, we are human. We are people. We're husbands and fathers and sons and friends and all the things that you all are. And we have our own mortal struggles and days where we just, sometimes we miss it.
Fight with our wives. Yeah. Scream at our kids.
Say the wrong thing.
Have to apologize to people.
Yeah. And so I thought it was good. And I hope that it came across that way of us just trying to share our heart and let you know that, like, hey, you're not alone. Like, we are all in this thing together. We are one body, one church, one group of believers. And so for me, it was, I just thought about how I would have viewed that when I was growing up, when I was in church as a teenager and as a young adult, just to see that kind of vulnerability from a leader and from a transparency and even in culture that's like, it's not an accepted thing. Like, the leader's got to be the one who's impervious to any kind of attack and doesn't have an off day and doesn't struggle and can't let them see you sweat, you know. And that's what we like from, you know, to go back to sports as I always do, that's what we like from even our quarterbacks. You know, right. You want the guy who just seems like he's never nervous, he's never rattled by anything, nothing gets to him, like he knows he's going to win in the end, but you don't always feel that. And so I thought I was excited to be able to share some of that with all of you yesterday. Just that, you know, there are days where I'm just like, I'm struggling, I'm tired, I don't know what I'm doing all the time. I even shared that yesterday, that, you know, sometimes people come into my office and they pour themselves out and I don't know what to say, you know, especially if I'm in the same boat as them. But we can always go to God in prayer, and that's my turn. It's just, hey, let's pray. Let's seek the one who does have the answer.
To me, we made mention of it, and I talked a lot about it. Just the thought of it's okay to ask questions. Like, it's okay to even ask God, like, hey, why am I going through this? Why is there a pandemic? Because guess what? He's big enough to handle it.
Yeah.
He's good enough. He's God enough. And even like just continuing the thought process of even going into what Micah talked about yesterday is you never know what the boundaries are. You don't know if you're not willing to ask, if you're not willing to open up, if you're not willing to ask someone to help you for accountability, then you'll never know if if there's accountability out there. And so there's several different, I mean, just the thought process of asking, being open, being receptive of what people are willing to discuss and talk about, I think is really key with a lot of what we talked about yesterday.
To me, 7 people sat on the stage yesterday. I didn't share as much, but I just kind of led the conversation.
Yeah.
But because I had 6 very transparent people that had some significant stories, from Megan learning how to not just be a wife and a mother, but become the daughter and the child of God that he's calling her to be. I mean, she's a great bride, she's a great mom, but stepping into the not just an extension of Chris's ministry,
Right.
but discovering who God is calling her to be, and that's her story there. But that started with just being, I used to get really anxious about, God, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do. What do you want me to do? And really, Jesus, the process is just follow me. That's what he wanted me to do. I said this to a teenager one time, and then I kept saying it. She didn't know what to do. There was this, between 18 and 20 years old, graduating high school, a lot of different options on the table. And I told her, when you don't know what to do, keep doing what you're supposed to do. When you don't know what to do, like, okay, God told Megan 2 years ago, there's more in you. Cool, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what it means.
Right.
I just know that that's what I heard God say. He didn't give me any specifics. And what I've learned is that God only gives specifics when I take the step.
Mm-hmm.
The specifics don't come before I take the step.
Yeah.
That's not faith. That's following instructions.
Right.
Following instructions and following Jesus are not the same
Right.
thing. He gave us a pretty good guide. I mean, he's given us some instructions in his book, but for the most part, this journey, the small Jesus and the small things, is really just step by step learning how to follow him and obey, which was honest Miss Janita and Megan's story.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Yep.
I don't know what to do, but I'll do it. Like, I'll do what you're asking me to.
Yeah, and it's something that we've touched on a lot in the past several months, actually, in some of your messages and even during Roundtable, just about enjoying the journey that God has you on, enjoying the ups and the downs, because God teaches us something through all of it. And if we get caught up in kind of what Pastor Tisha talked about in the whole singleness and the value of singleness, if we get caught up in worrying about what's going on around us and what everybody else is doing and what they have and we don't have, or what we have they don't have, and trying to get ahead and do all this stuff, then we miss what God has right in front of us and where he has us. And then sometimes he has to slow us down with some things.
Yeah.
And you know, I shared my story yesterday, and one of the things that I'm so thankful for, the stuff that God taught me through all the seasons of my life. But there are some things I wish I could have learned without having to go through that. I wish I would have learned sooner, or I wish I would have learned without making the mistake. You know, if I would have just slowed down and been content, as Pastor Tisha talked about, with where I was and where God had me and what he was trying to show me, and literally just finding Jesus in this. We've talked about this before too. We, as Americans, as the Western society, we like to celebrate the big and the courageous and the out there. But man, Jesus, a lot of times it's in those little things. And you know, we talk about Elijah and the tornado and the fire and the hurricane and all this that came. God wasn't in any of it. But then there was a small whisper. Yeah. And that's where God was trying to talk to him.
I think about just you mentioning Megan's story, how so many times I don't want to, right? We get that, we hear that, or I don't know what to do, and we quit in the middle of the I don't know what to do. And I'm actually reading Joseph, and I think about our sermon series that we went through a couple months ago, I'm going through Genesis and reading that right now, and how many times do we just throw in the towel too early instead of hanging on to that promise or that dream that God's given us? And so we quit too early, we throw in the towel. You know, what would have happened if Megan, you know, that many years ago would have said, well, if that's the case, then I just quit. Like, I can't go on. I can't keep doing this. And so I would encourage us, even like what Letitia was talking about yesterday, that lack of contentment that oftentimes can creep in because you're single. Instead of valuing what God wants to do in the midst of that season in your life is develop you. That's your calling for that season, for that moment. He wants to hone that in your life and develop something and equip something in you that may not be birthed yet, but is coming.
Everything that we talked about yesterday, we're trying to undo a current perspective to regain the proper perspective.
Yeah.
For instance, in our society, if you're not married by the time you're in your middle 20s, even in the church, it's really sad how it's crept into the church, and we've totally missed the season that Paul called, as Pastor Letitia pointed out yesterday, a season of undivided devotion. Yeah. Undivided. As a married man, my devotion is divided. I have a bride, I am a bride. I'm torn. Like, my devotion is divided. But in singleness, I had this time from, we can be a little honest, from puberty to intimacy, that I had the opportunity to really be fully devoted to God. But I wasn't. Yeah. Because even as a single man, I was still constantly pursuing the thing that I hope to have one day, instead of just pursuing Jesus and allowing him to show me what he wants for me one day. Right. And that is, to me, an injustice. Whether you're single or married or not, we get confused, again, about the journey. We get confused in our walk by the specifics. God's desire is not giving you directions. It's establishing, ordaining, and then using you as you are undividedly devoted to him. Like, that's the process. And what I've found, specifically in church ministry and even for myself, is when something happens in life, when you guys are about to have a baby, we're going to launch a school, we want to build a building, small groups are coming up, your whole everything from November to, it's about to just get blown up from February to March. What I found is if we're not careful, our busyness can get in the way of what God wanted to do. Our busyness becomes an idol. I'll say it this way: Jesus takes a back seat to our busyness.
Yeah.
And I see it in finances. I see it in serving. I see it in, well, I know we're gonna take a break this semester. You know, whether it's, and I think that when Jesus takes a back seat to our busyness becomes an idol that is in the way of what God wanted to do in us, and or cliche but true, and or through us. And that same thing, that's in intimacy, which is the foundation of purity. It's in serving, it's in giving, it's in attending. More importantly, it's in our personal life with him, just following him on a daily basis.
Yeah. And, you know, you could probably, we talk about, okay, the answer to how to become more like Jesus and be a better husband and find your ministry and do all this stuff. It's like, okay, how is that found in spending time with Jesus? Like, I don't understand.
Right.
The one thing that helped me one time, you know, I was kind of having that question. Well, I just need to do it better. I need to be better at that. I don't need to spend more time in prayer. I pray enough. And one of my former pastors, Jason Heath, he shares a story of whenever they were doing tornado cleanup in Joplin, Missouri, with those, those bad tornadoes that came through at that time, and he said he was trying to cut up this tree, and it was just taking him forever, and he was giving the saw everything it had, and he said this old man came and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You're going to be here way longer than you have to." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You didn't take the time to sit down and file every one of those teeth. And because you're working with a dull blade, you're not sharp. And so what should have taken you 30 minutes has now taken you 3 hours because you're trying to just to do and to do and to be and to go." And when you just take that time to spend time with Jesus and let him sharpen those things, let him work those edges out and make you sharp and use you and create you for your purpose, instead of just running on dull the whole time, spending that time with Jesus and that personal, as you pointed out, we can't pour out of an empty tank. We can't run on empty. We have to have something in there to be able to give.
Yeah. So practically for me and for all of us, what we talked about yesterday, and how do we sharpen? How do we not become so busy? Practically, it is prioritizing those things in their proper place and saying, "You know what? No, I'm going to keep Jesus first in my life." What does that include? That includes praying and reading every day. Aim for 7, hit 4 if you got to, but aim nonetheless. You can't pour out of emptiness. You can't pour out of something that you don't have in your life. And so if you're not attempting that, if you're not trying at least, then your busy lifestyle can get out of hand and ultimately becomes the priority, and even, as you put it, an idol.
You can even be doing things for Jesus.
Yeah.
And just be busy for him.
Yeah.
And still totally miss the point or the purpose or the heart behind what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish. I think the Pharisees were doing that when Jesus said, "Hey, look, you're really good at like all these things, but you're forgetting the more important work and or aspect of the work." He says it to the church. Is it Ephesus? You're doing this right. You're doing this right. You're doing this right. You're doing. You're busy, man. You are building. You are growing. But you have forgotten your first love.
Yeah.
So you're not listening. And you're missing some of the things that I have for you, doing all these other things that you think you need to get done.
It's funny that you bring that up. It's the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians 13. That's where we get the love chapter from, where he talks about what love is and what it isn't, because in chapter 12 he had just listed all these things in the Corinthians. I say it's funny because I saw this morning someone shared a quote from a pastor talking about 1 Corinthians 13 is not just something nice and sweet we should read at a wedding on what love is, but it comes on the heels of Paul admonishing the church on, you're doing all of this stuff, but you're forgetting the heart behind it. You're forgetting why you're doing all of this stuff in the first place and who gave you the grace to do it. The thing that I loved yesterday that Micah shared is, and you even touched on it, that growing up it was always just, true love waits. The one way to stay pure is just to wait until you're married. And so then now I have this expectation of what marriage is supposed to do for my spiritual life, what's supposed to do for my purity, and all these things that I've been battling for years, well, it's going to be solved once I get married. No, it really just magnified everything that I had been struggling with for years now that I'm in this marriage. And so getting this idea of the heart behind everything, and it's really just that prayer, that spending time with Jesus and finding him in the small things. That's why I know we called it several different things, confessions of a pastor, or sit down, but really it is finding Jesus in the small things, because that's where it all begins out of. That's where it flows out of. That's where we find our identity and our singleness and our purpose and all of these things.
Megan told a story, and we'll begin to wrap up, but Jesus in the small things. Yesterday, look, we talked about the value of singleness. We talked about purity. We talked about dealing with grief and whether God was still good. We talked about hearing from God. We talked about taking steps of faith, whether we knew what those steps were going to look like or even how we were going to take them. And then we talked about prioritizing in a season of life that is basically you're playing prevent defense just to try to keep up with your own children. Right. And we all get those things. So what we have to do especially when we feel that way, or when we're overwhelmed by what's going on in society and we're not getting to do what we wanted to do, or we have legitimate concern because our doctor says it's not good for us to go out in public, or I really want to get away, I really want to do this, but my Disney trip got canceled. I had 2 vacations planned last year. They both got canceled because of concerns over COVID, not because of COVID-19, but because of concerns behind COVID-19. And so in those, I've got to redirect, okay, maybe God is trying to speak through this.
Yeah.
Megan's story, rocking Gabriel, 3 children in 4 years, 2 toddlers and an infant. And they all wanted mama. And I was full-time youth and worship at a small church, but I was the only other guy on staff. So I'm blowing and going in ministry. She's at home by herself with 3 children every day. She's rocking Gabriel at 11 o'clock at night, crying and apologizing to Jesus for not having spent any time with him recently. Lord, I'm sorry I haven't spent any time. I haven't done anything with you recently. And she heard that still small voice, probably the same voice she heard that said start a school. She heard that still small voice that said there's more in you, except for this time he said, you're serving me right now. You're honoring me right now. You're doing what I want you to do. And in that moment, she took a breath. Okay, so in all the things that we've been talking about, and sometimes busyness is productivity. It's remembering that you're supposed to let God do those things with you. It's not like Jesus over here and your life over here. Like he wants to do that. He wants to do that with you. He wants to have those conversations with you in the middle of your day.
Yeah.
In the middle of your work. In the middle of your whatever it is that you have to do and you have to get done. Because there are those times that, hey, final thoughts?
I keep on hearing the word just vulnerable. I feel like yesterday we were all very vulnerable, very open, honest, transparent. And obviously through the season that we all experience, are you willing to be vulnerable and admit like when you need God to enter into that situation? And so many times we wait until, like you said, the season is rough, the season is, are you willing to just be open in that moment? To allow to, like, God, I need you right here, right now. I'm choosing to trust you. Or when things are on the greatest, you're having the greatest day of your life, or weeks are good and they're not too busy and they're not too strained, are you willing to be vulnerable with God and being open in that moment, saying, God, I'm still here and I'm still willing to do anything you want for me, you have for me. And so I just feel like that word vulnerable, I just need to be willing and obedient no matter what the season, no matter what the case, just to follow God and trust his voice.
Yeah, and I think what yesterday having the diversity on the stage showed us is that God can work through any season, any stage of life, any circumstance, any perceived setback or promotion. Like God can work through it all. He's big enough to handle it. And if we just take that time to say, God, I don't know, as you said, I don't know how, but I'll do it. And I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. But God, I trust you and I'm following you. I don't think he's ever steered anyone wrong. And I've had this conversation with someone, and it was on the topic of, whether or not to follow God or follow their own dreams. But it applies here is, I don't think there's ever been anybody on their deathbed that says, man, I shouldn't have given that much to God. Man, I shouldn't have given God my whole life. I shouldn't have followed him. That was a mistake. It was a regret. I don't think anyone has ever said that. And for sure, I've never heard of it. But normally it's the opposite. Man, there's so much more I believe God had for me, and I was scared to do it, or I was too distracted, or, whatever, name it.
Hey, go watch the final 10 minutes of yesterday's message if you want some take-homes. Don't forget, we're in the 21 days. If you want to pull that up, Pastor, it was, what's the name of the?
James River Church.
James River. I had River, that's all I had.
It was a 21-day reading, and so we're on day 15,
Yeah, or just
Because we have
open it
6
up
days
and
left.
start reading,
But
and
yeah,
just
and just
make it
start
21
wherever.
days from now if you're not already in. And don't forget this weekend, special guest Alan Griffin, evangelist with the Assemblies of God out of Florida, going to do a great job with us for 3 services: Sunday night, I believe at 6 p.m., Monday night at 7 p.m., men's dinner next Tuesday, which I'm really looking forward to because there's going to be some fried delights at that. And then Wednesday night, Pastor Den Hussey joining us here for a all-in service, a one big night, if you will, with students and adults. So look forward to seeing you there. Have a great week, and holler at us if we can do anything for you. God bless you.